Hello, I'm Georgi Sidorov, and this is my presentation on the website that me, along John Clark and Tara McGivern, did for web animation. First, I will show you the website itself in a browser. This is the index page. It has a quick and easy animation that lasts 10 seconds. Then it brings us to the home page. This is one of the parts that I did fully myself. It is a slider that every couple of seconds changes. All of it is linkable, and clicking on the image will bring you to the correct page. It is very nice, and it will loop once it's done all three images. It will loop over and over again. And another part was the responsive design, which I also had to do, and this is how it works when the browser is small and when it's large. So that's another thing that I had to do. I had to make a very responsive website and had to fix the other two companions pages to make it work. The animations that I did on my page were an easy enough hover effect, but because of the responsiveness, it was much harder to do, and each of them is clickable, which brings you to the full image. Also, I thought, since we are doing a news website, I would have a marquee running on the bottom. First, I did try a normal marquee, but it did not work everywhere and it was outdated, so I created my own CSS false marquee, which is a running line like most news websites or channels would have. So let's get into the code. This is the home page. It consists very easily, my area is of the images that are on the slider. There's 3 of them. Then there is titles. There's 2 titles. There's a first span and a second span. One is larger than the other. And then when we go to the CSS for this, we can see that the slider is actually 90% width, so no matter what, it will be 90% width of the size. But so it doesn't get too large, I have a max width set, which looks very nicely in here, and it fits in perfectly. The position is relative, so it's always in place, but all the text within it is all absolute. I put this Z index in front so they will never clash, the images and the text, and I have given styles to each of the spans for the source code, so that's why the first span on the home page is larger than the other one. They also do make the website responsive whenever it goes smaller than a certain amount of pixels. The text does resize and become actually smaller. What I did was I created the images so they are side by side, and I created keyframes that would move each image by 100% to the left, creating like a gallery that would slide in and out. I have given it basic styles like box shadows, overflow, so you wouldn't see the other 2 images, and I have it all in a loop. I have all the images in a loop, so it never ends. But the titles were much harder to do, because since they are overlaying, I had to create another keyframes that would change the opacity rather than making the text slide. Also, I gave it nice styling, and I positioned it always 40% to the top, because I believe that even when it's small, it fits in perfectly with the scenery and always looks nice without blocking off most of the image. I use transition, which looks very nice and clean, and white color on the back of the image to make it look pretty. Then each of the titles had a delay because I couldn't make it work. Otherwise, it had to be done so that after once one of the image slides out, the text would appear and the previous one would disappear. So I had to create specific percentages that would match this, and it would be, otherwise opacity would be 0, except for that one time when it needs to be full. This slider is actually an elaborate version of my previous one for one of the other assignments, which consisted of the images being images and text moving on when you click a button. This was much harder to do, as now I had to time it correctly, rather than in the previous it would be on which one is clicked is the one that's active. And then the next thing I had to do was on my home page create the images so they're responsive and all positioned well, and the marquee. So let's go to that. For the images, it was in the HTML pretty easy. Give the image and give the H4 the text of what the image is, and same goes for the marquee. Just put it inside a div called marquee to suit its name, and 2 lines of text, which the second one will have a delay of 10 seconds, I think, to make it nice and smooth. Now when we go to the code for the images, this is one of the longest things I had to do and the hardest ones, because when I started giving pixels at the start to all the borders, but then because of the responsive design I have to use percentages for the margins, and I had to calculate that each image has to be 100%, but each line inside the UL has to be 31%, with 1% margin on each side, giving it 33% in total. And when you add all 3 images together, that brings you up to 99%, which is 1% off, which you can see on the left side, which you actually have to move later. And then when you put the images in a float, it brings them all to the left, because they all take up 33%, you can fit 3 on each page. I had to align them, and I have to give them a border box so I could keep the text within it. The text was easy to do. It was just give it a size, not much styling. And then the image had a transition, which I thought was really nice, that when you hover, the opacity would change to 0.6, making it obvious that this image is clickable and is a link. I had to get rid of the padding for everything because that was ruining a lot of the sizing for it. Lastly, I did the marquee. The marquee was is very basic. It's 2 lines running in after each other, but however they also, as I had to make responsive design, become smaller if the browser is smaller, yet still they all fit without anything being cut off. What I had to do was I had to first create a box of the div which the text is located in. I gave it a max width the same as the max width of the entire page, so it would be a full line, and I gave it a height 30, but when the browser is smaller, the height becomes I have it changed so it becomes much smaller as well. See, height becomes 25 rather than the previous 30. And then overflow hidden, so you wouldn't see the text that isn't currently on the page, and I put the position of it to relative so nothing goes over it. I created an easy border, background, and radius for the little corners so it looks a bit neater. Then for the images in the, well, for the text in the marquee, I had to translate it to the right. So I used the transform function, translate x, and this brought the first line of text over by 100%, and the second one over by 100%. And when it would work, the image would slide in to 0, which is actually the start of the page, but it would do this slowly, and then it would move out 100, and then the second one would do this. And after it's done, it would repeat again. So the first one would be just 20 seconds and it would slide in easily, but the second one would have a 10-second delay so they don't overlap. There was a lot of styling for the P tag for the text within the marquee. I gave it a drop shadow, I gave it height, I gave it absolute position so they don't overlap again, as in if it was relative the box wouldn't fit both of the texts in. I gave it a color and I gave it a font size, which also decreases when it decreases by half when it's the max width of the page is 600 pixels. Lastly, I had to make the entire website responsive. To do that, I created a div or a location which fills up, which is this box here. It contains everything that's on the page, and it has a little background shade to make it more visible, and I gave it an auto margin so it'd always be positioned in the middle no matter what happens. You can see this working really well here, and I gave it a max width so none of the images become too big or the page looks out of proportion. This gives it a very nice feel depending on which platform you use it on. The way I did it was everything inside this inside this div was a percentage of it.